What's happening, everybody? I am here today to finally talk to you about the pre-release weekend that just took place this past weekend, a week ago almost. We're a little late on this, but it's been a really long time since I've talked about Paper Magic, and I've never really done a deck tech specifically like this before, so it could be a little awkward. Now, right off the bat, I want to jump straight into some of the cards, and then we'll talk about strategy and stuff like that after we have something on the screen to look at. So, I really wanted to just kind of kick things off here. These cards aren't really in any particular order. I'm just kind of looking at them as they came. I separated them kind of by color and by type. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is some of our black creatures that we brought into battle. The first one we're going to be looking at is this icebreaker here. It's a good way to just kind of break the ice and for you and I to become better acquainted. Now, one of the things that I try and do with any drafting deck or sealed deck that I build is you want to keep it down to 40 cards. We've talked about that a ton on the Duels of the Planeswalkers videos, but 40 cards is really the pinnacle of what you want to do. You only want as many cards as you're forced to have. I mean, if they let you have 30, run 30, because what that's going to allow you to do is get to the cards that you need. You're going to find your removal when you need it. You're going to find your bombs when you need them. And you got to remember that in sealed especially, you don't have 4 copies of cards. You don't have, you can have more than that, but you don't have the constructed aspect of it where you were able to sit down with a pen and paper and figure out, what is my ratio on this card in a 60 card deck? What's my ratio on this? If you only have one removal spell, if you only drew, one removal spell out of your pool, then you want to find that guy frequently. So you want to keep it down to 40 cards. And to that point, I like to go with the traditional 16-16-8, which is 16 creatures, 16 lands, 8 spells. The spells are going to heavily focus on removal and combat tricks. And that's a basic kind of setup for what you want your deck to look like. It's very basic. Now, when you become more comfortable, after you've started out for a while, been playing Magic for a while, you can obviously change that to suit your own needs and what you want to do. But in the sealed format, it's really more about outpacing your opponent than anything else. I mean, if you have, there was a guy at our local Magic shop that played a deck that was pretty much all 1-drops, but he had like an insane amount of creatures. I don't even remember. He had like 30 creatures or something, and he just overwhelmed people because they only had so many ways to deal with the other creatures and only had so many creatures of their own. So that's kind of an outlier. Don't try and mimic that. But it's really all about outpacing your opponent, and that's one of the things that you need to focus on. So having that removal, having those combat tricks, having a lot of creatures is going to be baseline how you get through this kind of stuff. So we're looking at this guy. Each player discards a card. This isn't particularly useful. I just grabbed him as a 2/3 body. I didn't have a lot of creatures in my pool. I actually used every single creature that I had the ability to take. Because I only had 15 creatures in these 2 colors, and my other pulls were a little weak, so it was kind of an issue. I felt like some of my best chances were in this. I really liked the interaction of Exploit with some of the other cards that I had, so I wanted to check that out. So checking out our next card, speaking of Exploit, we've got Simulgar Butcher. It's Exploit card, and of course that means that when this enters the battlefield, we may also sacrifice a creature. Now this guy's amazing because there is a indestructible effect in play. The one that I ran into is a green creature. I believe it was a 4/3. You can bounce another creature and it gains indestructible. Super easily killed by this thing. You just have to play it at the right time. Make sure they don't have any tricks to bump it up, because there are some pump spells in this current format. So you just kind of had to be a little careful. And this was a special pre-release event because it wasn't, the midnight. They actually do weird pre-release events all through the weekend at my card shop. So we were able to get into one of those. And, we didn't go to the midnight one. I kind of missed out on that. And I do kind of miss playing midnight releases, but we did get into one of these special ones. So this Neg 3 Neg 3 is really great. I mean, never forget that Neg 3 is going to take care of indestructibility, because indestructibility just stops them from being destroyed from like normal effects. But the stinger to that is that if you reach 0 as a result of like a Neg 3 effect, or for any other weird effect that I'm probably not thinking of right now, even as an indestructible creature, you're going to hit the yard. So that's just an interesting thing to note. The indestructibility really more just keeps it from hitting 0 due to damage. Now, it does technically hit 0, but that's when the indestructibility kicks in. It's kind of a complicated thing, but just as long as you remember, the bottom line, that you can do negative effects or put counters on stuff, neg 1 counters or something like that to get rid of those creatures. That's kind of something to keep in mind. We got Sadist up next. It's another exploit creature. When this creature enters the battlefield, sacrifice a creature. We already talked about that. But this guy makes our opponent lose 2 life and we gain 2 life. This came in handy maybe once or twice. It's a 1/3 dude for 2. That's not bad. Again, the exploit kind of worked out in our favor in other ways, and this card didn't show up. I think I only saw it once during the pre-release event. So next we got this Hulk. It's got Megamorph. We didn't really get a chance to use him. Like I said, this isn't a great card. Megamorph's really interesting. I played with Morph way back in the day when I was playing Paper Magic originally, when I first started out. This guy's not super special. It costs a ton. Like I said, I mean, like looking at this, I just like my stomach kind of churns that I even had this guy in my deck, but whatever, we'll toss that to the side. Next, we got Kolagurga Hillerhorn Skirmisher. This guy's got Dash. Dash is a really interesting ability. The creature gains haste. It kind of jumps out of your hand, gains haste. It can swing in for an attack, which is a lot of fun, and then it bounces back to your hand at the end of your current turn. So it's at the next end step, which means your turn. It's going to bounce back to your hand. Really interesting cards to play with. I wanted to. Some of my only Dash cards were in red and black. I really just kind of went with what I wanted to play with. After looking through everything I had in my pile, I wanted to play with Exploit, wanted to play with Dash. This was really the only way to do it. This guy's pretty fun. We've got another card later on that reduces our Dash cost. So, 1 for 2 damage, late game, just maybe overwhelm, try and get stuff out on the field. It's an interesting way to kind of look at things. We've got Hand of Simulgar here. Now, this guy's got Death Touch. He's Death Touch 2/1. I like that because it's kind of removal. It depends on how good your opponent is. Obviously, this thing falls to things like Twin Bolt, which we'll be talking about later on. And you can get 2 for 1 really bad off that Twin Bolt. Twin Bolt's a very good limited card, actually. I think it's undervalued slightly, but that's a pretty good card. Anything with Death Touch is pretty great in sealed formats, so we'll just toss that to the side. Deathbringer Regent. Now, this card was a home run hitter for me. Nobody ever expected me to play him. He came down angry. And you just have to be careful. You just have to know exactly when to use them. Sometimes you have to dash in somebody for cheap so that you can get that 5th and throw your card down here and just massacre everybody. Obviously, it reads that if you cast it from your hand and there are 5 or more other creatures on the battlefield, be sure you count that up right. It needs to be 6 total when this guy enters play. Then you go ahead and just burn the whole field. You're going to put all creatures away. I actually got a win out of this specifically. A lot of the wins that I got, and we did only lose 1 game at the pre-release event, but a lot of the events or the games that I played in came down to the wire with this deck. This is a weird deck. It's kind of had some issues. But I think that it worked out well. We would get down to 4, down to 3, but it doesn't really matter as long as you at least have 1. So we did okay. We got our opponents down to 0, which is a bit better. Next, we got this Aven. It's flying exploit. This is actually amazing. I loved this card. Used it a ton. We actually brought it back every once in a while. We do have Grave Purge in here that we'll talk about later. This guy just does his job. You lose 2 life, you get 2 cards. Amazing, especially in sealed format. You're digging down in your pile. You got to think about percentages. If you only have 30 cards left, tearing up 2 is amazing. It's going to help you find your Twin Bolt if you need it. You know, it's going to help you find Deathwind, which we also had in here. It's kind of a special case. And maybe your Regent if you need that going on. So Avon was really good in here. And then last, we have this Bloodchin Rager, which actually came in handy. It's got an interesting effect on it. When he attacks, each warrior creature you control can't be blocked this turn except by 2 or more creatures. So the amount of removal we had with the Twin Bolts and the Deathwinds and things like this, coupled with this guy, allowed us to sneak past enough damage to murder our opponent on more than one occasion. So that is going to be your black creatures. Next, we're going to jump straight into red creatures, hopefully, if I have these situated right. We're going to look at Warbringer. Dash costs, you pay cost 2 less. So this is the guy we were talking about. He is a 4-drop. He's got a dash cost of his own, 3/3, but he does make everything else a little bit cheaper, so he's kind of nice to have around. I didn't have a problem with him. He seemed to do his job okay. Next, we got 2 Summit Prowlers. Not my favorite card, but it's a 4/3 body. For 4 mana, I don't like tying up my mana, but if you got 6 or something, you can do some tricks or something like that. Maybe dropping those guys down. And then, of course, they also get the job done when they can. We've got this Scream Reach Brawler. This guy's got a dash cost of his own. He's a 2/3. It's a really powerful dash card. It's a better dash ability than it is just getting the body out. But remember, if you dash, you can't block. So sometimes you need that 3 on there more than you need the 2 damage on the other side of the field. And then we've got Flame Rush Raida. This guy has some really interesting effects. He's got a dash cost of his own for 4, which is just 1 less than his actual cost, and he's only a 3/3, which wouldn't be great, but his dash cost is excellent when you see what else he does, and you got to remember this guy's a warrior, which gels really well with the Bloodchin that we had earlier. This guy was super good in Limited, really got the job done whenever he went out there on the field because you have that dash cost that's so inexpensive. The Bloodchin, if they were both out there, nobody's blockable. It depends in a limited format when your opponent doesn't necessarily have a lot of creatures out there. It's a big deal. This actually won a game for me almost by itself. The Bloodchin Rager was there as well, but that interaction is really kind of overwhelming when you're in Limited and you only have like 16 creatures, 20 creatures in that window. Some decks only have 13, 12. They can't deal with something like this, especially if you're dashing it in and just getting them out of there every so often. Next, we've got a special guest. We're looking at Swift Warkite. This is not a slow Warkite. This is not the Warkite of your grandpappy's age. This is a quick guy here. He's got a very interesting ability. When he comes into the battlefield, which enter the battlefield effects are some of my favorite things in the game because even if they are able to remove the creature, you still get that effect, that benefit there. 3 or less from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield, and then you bounce that onto your hand at the beginning of the next end step. We were, of course, able to use this with the Death Toucher that we had out there. And with that exploit, now our exploit costs are a little bit higher than that. You can see that not all of our exploit creatures were able to utilize this. But when you think about the fact that you can sack a guy out, immediately get it back to abuse the exploit, it's really awesome. Rager can come back after this. Swift Warkite, actually really, really cool, all things considered, in a sealed format. Very powerful because that card, if the card does something as well when it enters the battlefield, then you're really in business because you're kind of dinging it twice because it comes back to your hand afterwards. Now, the more astute amongst you will notice that we only have 15 creature cards up there. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all we had. So I counted, and I don't usually do this, but I counted Kolagnar Monument. That's pretty close. The pronunciation, it's more of a guttural pronunciation than you're used to, but it's a southern dialect, so it's fine. As a creature, even though it is kind of a mana boon, it is fixing, which is nice. But really, I don't like to count stuff like this as a creature. I'd count it as like a mana, or more than likely, I would count this as one of our spells. But it can become a creature, and when you look at some of the other spells that we're going to talk about, in particular, we've got Deadly Wanderings that we're going to talk about here in the spells and enchantments section in a second. It is actually a very useful card because if your opponent forgets about it, you can just pop that back in. It's a 4/6 flyer. The evasion's amazing, all that kind of stuff. That actually happened once, so this guy is a creature for all intents and purposes where I come from. Now we are going to talk about some of the other cards that we had in here. Like I said, I usually like to keep it pretty simple. I like to keep this restricted to just removal spells or to combat tricks so that we can kind of overwhelm our opponent, be kind of fast with it. But like we said a second ago, we did take a look at Deadly Wanderings. I did have one copy of this card. It's a very interesting card. As long as you control exactly one creature, that creature gets +2/+0 and has Death Touch and Lifelink. The Death Touch is amazing. Lifelink's amazing. This card, probably not playable in Standard, but in Sealed, pretty goddamn amazing because you're able to pull those tricks, especially with the exploit. When you can throw an exploit guy down, he can exploit himself. He can exploit a buddy. You know, you just murder something. You have one creature out there. You got an exploit cost. You got something going on. And then you have the Deadly Wanderings. Really awesome and limited. I will fight anyone who says it's not. It costs a ton of mana, but it really can change the momentum of the game. Death Touch, amazing as well. Now, the next card we're going to talk about is Ancestral Vengeance. Now, this is not my favorite card. I'm not super happy that I had to have it in there. Originally, we had, is it Duress in this set? 1 mana, look through your opponent's hand. And that's basically what that card is for, is to look through your opponent's hand. Because early game, you're able to look through their hand, write down what they have, formulate strategies, figure things out, mark cards off as they play them, and really kind of be in control of both sides of the game. But I found that board-wise, position-wise, I was getting a little overwhelmed early on, so I did need things like Vengeance out there to kind of even up the playing field a little bit and kind of speed me up. You know, kill a creature perhaps, give one of mine +1/+1, or change it up enough so that they don't have favorable blocks, or that I have favorable blocks. That was kind of the reason this card went in. Next, we have Grave Purge. Put any number of target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library, draw a card. This is really cool as long as you don't go crazy with it. Now, in my gameplay with it, I never went beyond 2 creatures on there because you're going to draw one immediately. Your next turn, you're going to draw another. You don't want to spend the next 3 or 4 turns just drawing creatures unless you have something really impressive in there that you want to work up to. But try and reserve yourself when you're doing this in a limited format. I also had one instance where I was mana screwed on turn 4. I had not drawn a land yet. So I had Twin Bolt open, and on my opponent's end step, I went ahead and Grave Purged for 0 so I could draw a card. Drew the card, it wasn't a land. Next card off the top was a land. I was able to stabilize afterwards and win the game. So don't forget that you can utilize cards in ways that they are not intended. It's actually a really important thing to keep in mind, especially in sealed format when you don't have the strategies at your fingertips that you usually do. Deathwind, Nagex. This murders indestructible creatures as well. Really, really good. It's instant speed, which is what makes it really good. One copy of that. Now getting into red, we didn't have too many red spells, but we did have Temur Battle Rage. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. This is the kind of combat tricks I'm talking about. And then it also has Ferocious. Target creature also gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. This is bomb. Trample and double strike is almost as awesome as trample and death touch. Like, it is just a fun time for the whole family as long as they're sitting on your side of the field. And it's instant speed, which is fantastic. You can get those blocks. You can trick people. Fantastic. Next, we're going to look at 2 copies of Twin Bolt. Now, this was a really good card because there's a surprising amount of stuff in the format that is 2-1 in the rump early game that you want to get rid of, or stuff late game that's going to be jostling you, messing with you, and you're going to want to use these to either kill one or both of those creatures. I faced I faced 2 green decks or 2 green games that I played where this spell was really a home run hitter. There was a lot of 1 in the rumps there that I need to take care of. And then, of course, instant speed, 2 damage to something is pretty good too. So 2 copies of that. That was really good. And then we have 1 copy of Tail Slash. Not my favorite card. It's instant speed removal though, maybe. Because you can block with a creature and then utilize this. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. It's one of those things I would have rather had something a little bit more solid removal-wise, but I did view that I needed a new removal card or another removal card, so I did run that. Then as far as the lands go, I don't remember the exact split. It more heavily favored black, though, obviously, because we had more creatures that needed to come out early game. You got the Rager, you've got the Hand, and then you've got Sadist, stuff like that. We needed to get those out early, but it was only slightly favoring the black because then we had the red stuff like our removal that we wanted to have in there. We also had the good fortune of Bloodfell Caves out on the field to kind of generate that mana fixing as well. So like I said, pre-release went really well. We won a lot of games, lost a little bit, and came out feeling pretty good. I mean, I hadn't played Paper Magic in a long time. It was a lot of fun, and I really had a good time with it. You can kind of look at this deck and see that it was not bad. It required a little bit of finagling to get it to do what I wanted it to every once in a while, but by and large, it was a pretty solid deck. I had a lot of fun playing with it. I hope you guys had a lot of fun watching this video. I hope you enjoyed your pre-release. I might start doing more Paper Magic stuff because I really enjoyed this. I kind of want to get back into drafting, and it was just good to feel the cardboard in my hands again after playing the Duels of the Planeswalkers for so long. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to check out the channel because I do a ton of Magic the Gathering stuff. There's Duel of the Planeswalkers, but there's other stuff on there. We're also doing Spellweaver now, which is a game that's not even out yet that's really exciting. I've played Hearthstone off and on a little bit. I've dabbled in Hearthstone, a little bit of Soulforge. Lots of trading card games get covered on the channel. So if you just came to watch this, well, I appreciate you watching. But hopefully you'll subscribe and like what you see and kind of hang out with us. If you're one of my usual viewers, then let me know what you thought of having this kind of format video on the channel. It was a lot of fun to put together, actually, making all the little cards zoom across the screen was kind of a blast. So I enjoyed putting it together. Let me know if you guys want any more of this. I don't really play Standard anymore, but who knows? Maybe if you guys convince me, I'll get back into it and we can do some more deck techs like this later on. No matter what you do, though, I want to thank you for watching this episode, this special little pre-release summation episode, and tell you that I appreciate it and that I hope you will subscribe and keep watching in the future. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you in one way or another later on.